You might think the most dangerous motorcycles are illegal customs or modern machines topping 125 miles per hour. Not wrong, but the truth is far stranger. Throughout the 20th century, there were motorcycles legally built and sold, yet deadly by design. These bikes weren't just dangerous because of speed, but due to outdated engineering, flawed technology, or simply ideas so bizarre they defied every principle of safety. From two-stroke beasts that wheelied without warning to V8-powered racers that even professionals refused to ride, this list uncovers the forgotten dangers of the two-wheeled world. Some machines were so bizarre, so unsafe, and so far ahead of safety standards that to this day, many still ask, was this a real motorcycle or just a mechanical joke? 1997, Suzuki TL1000S. The 1997 Suzuki TL1000S debuted as Japan's answer to Ducati's V-Twins. It featured a 996 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V-twin engine, making around 125 horsepower and hitting top speeds near 160 miles per hour. Sounds reasonable for a sport bike, until you see what happens at speed. Instead of using a traditional rear shock, Suzuki equipped the TL1000S with a rotary damper, a compact space-saving design. But under hard acceleration or aggressive cornering, the damper overheated, causing rear-end wobble, the back of the bike shaking unpredictably. Worse, this often triggered a true nightmare, a tank slapper, where the handlebars violently shake side to side at high speed. Riders lost control instantly, some hitting the pavement before they knew what went wrong. Suzuki had to issue a recall and add a steering damper to reduce the risk, but the damage was done. The TL1000S wasn't hated because it was weak. It was feared because it was dangerous in the most deceptive way. 1982, Honda CX500 Turbo. In the early 1980s, Honda set out to build the future. And they did it by turbocharging a street bike. The CX500 Turbo was the world's first mass-produced turbocharged motorcycle. Powered by a 497 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V-twin, it made around 82 horsepower, nearly 30% more than its naturally aspirated sibling. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. Digital dash, thick plastic fairings, and an exhaust that resembled a jet engine. But the danger came from something deceptively small: turbo lag. Twist the throttle, and nothing. Then suddenly, all the power slammed into the rear wheel like a hammer strike. That made the CX500 Turbo incredibly hard to control during overtakes, mid-corner acceleration, or city traffic. Riders would lose traction, misjudge turns, and veer offline, simply because the bike responded too late and too violently. To make matters worse, it weighed over 570 pounds, had a soft frame, spongy suspension, and a rear drum brake. The tech was futuristic, the control not so much. 1971, Suzuki TM400 Cyclone. Launched during the dirt bike boom of the early 1970s, the TM400 was Suzuki's answer to off-road dominance. But instead of winning races, it quickly became a two-wheeled nightmare. Powered by a 396 cubic centimeter air-cooled, single-cylinder two-stroke engine, the TM400 made about 40 horsepower. Doesn't sound extreme? Remember, the bike weighed only around 220 pounds dry. And that power didn't build. It hit all at once, like flipping a switch. Throttle response wasn't linear. One small twist, and the front wheel jumped. The rear lost traction, especially on bumpy dirt trails. Things got worse with a flex-prone steel frame, weak suspension, and drum brakes that couldn't reliably stop the bike. Jumps often ended with the suspension bottoming out, throwing the rider into chaos. Even seasoned racers struggled to control it. Beginners stood almost no chance of survival. No wonder it earned nicknames like Bone Breaker and Widowmaker of the Dirt. 1986 to 1988, Suzuki GSX-R1100. When it comes to legendary sport bikes from the 1980s and 90s, the GSX-R1100 ranks near the top. But few know that its constant power upgrades turned it into a barely controllable beast. Launched in 1986, the GSX-R1100 featured a 1,127 cubic centimeter air and oil-cooled inline-4 engine, producing up to 145 horsepower, an insane figure for its time. The problem? The frame and suspension didn't keep up with the engine's power. At high speeds, especially during hard cornering or on imperfect roads, the bike began to flex and wobble, leading to high-speed instability. One wrong input could trigger a tank slapper, causing instant loss of control. The GSX-R1100 had no rider aids, no traction control, no ABS, just you, the throttle, and hope. Many crashes weren't caused by sheer speed, but because riders weren't ready for the bike's unpredictable behavior at the limit. 1985, Yamaha V-Max. When Yamaha introduced the V-Max in 1985, it wasn't just a cruiser. It was a speed punch to the chest of the motorcycle industry. Powered by a 1,197 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V4 engine with Yamaha's signature V-Boost system, the V-Max produced up to 145 horsepower, a wild figure for any cruiser in the 1980s. But power wasn't the only problem. The V-Max was simply too strong for its own chassis. Weighing nearly 600 pounds wet, the bike had a frame and suspension setup not built to handle its brutal acceleration. The front end lifted easily under throttle, the rear twisted under pressure, and high-speed cornering became dangerously unstable. The early braking system didn't help either. With dual front discs and a single rear disc, stopping the V-Max under stress was far from easy. Worse still, the cruiser appearance fooled many into thinking it was easy to ride. But one hard twist of the throttle revealed the truth. This was a drag bike in street clothing. The V-Max didn't forgive mistakes. It waited for one and then hit you with 145 angry horses. 1969, Kawasaki H1 Mach III. When Kawasaki launched the H1 Mach III in 1969, they didn't want to compete. They wanted to shock. And they succeeded. This 500cc two-stroke bike was so fast, many called it too dangerous to exist. Its air-cooled three-cylinder engine made about 60 horsepower, while the bike weighed only 384 pounds dry. With that brutal power-to-weight ratio, the H1 could hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, faster than most cars of its time. The problem was, it couldn't be controlled. Torque exploded high in the rev range, lifting the front wheel without warning. The basic frame flexed, the swing arm bent under stress. Suspension was weak, and both wheels used drum brakes, far from effective. The bike often slid, wobbled, or flipped when cornering hard. No matter how skilled the rider, they had to pray every time they twisted the throttle. The H1 Mach III was fast, light, and dangerous enough that Kawasaki had to redesign the entire chassis for later versions. But by then, the damage was done. 1955, Vincent Black Shadow. In the mid-1950s, one motorcycle earned the world's respect and fear. Not for its looks, but for its speed and lack of control. The Vincent Black Shadow. Powered by a 998 cubic centimeter air-cooled V-twin, the Black Shadow produced about 55 horsepower. But don't let that number fool you. Weighing just around 450 pounds, the bike could exceed 125 miles per hour, at a time when most cars struggled to hit 70. That was a speed few had ever felt, let alone mastered. And the Black Shadow gave you nothing to keep you safe at that pace. Its frame flexed at high speeds, the suspension was stiff and unforgiving, and both wheels used drum brakes, far too weak for emergency stops on slick roads. The handlebars vibrated, and the chassis shook violently at full throttle. Even seasoned racers treated the Vincent with caution. It was used by British police to chase down criminals, but off-duty, it became a death trap for overconfident riders. 1924 to 1940. Brough Superior SS100. In the 1920s, the Brough Superior SS100 was called the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles. But behind its luxury image was a machine that could kill you if you weren't absolutely focused. The SS100 was the first motorcycle ever factory guaranteed to hit 100 miles per hour. A bold claim in an era when roads, tires, and riding gear were primitive at best. Powered by a 998 cubic centimeter V-twin, making about 73 horsepower and weighing just under 400 pounds, the SS100 was impressive. But here's the catch. No modern suspension, a rigid frame, skinny tires, and primitive drum brakes. At high speeds, the bike shook violently. If you lost control, there was no helmet to save you, because helmets weren't yet common. The most famous tragedy tied to the SS100 was the death of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, who crashed fatally while riding one. His death led to studies on head injuries, which eventually led to the invention of the modern motorcycle helmet. 1955. Moto Guzzi V8. Unveiled in 1955 for Grand Prix racing, the Moto Guzzi V8 featured a 500cc liquid-cooled V8 engine producing about 78 horsepower. Weighing just over 300 pounds, it could reach speeds over 170 miles per hour, far faster than anything else of its time. Sounds futuristic? That was the problem. While frames, tires, and brakes were still primitive, Moto Guzzi shoved a monster engine into a chassis that couldn't handle it. The brakes couldn't stop it. The tires couldn't grip. The frame flexed. Riders had to keep the revs sky high to access the power band. One wrong twist of the throttle, and the bike would slide, wobble, or buck wildly. Many professional racers refused to ride it, calling it an untamable beast, and maintaining it nearly impossible. The Moto Guzzi V8 didn't fail for lack of power. It failed because it was a generation too early, with no one ready to catch up. 1972, Kawasaki H2 Mach IV. When Kawasaki introduced the H2 Mach IV in 1972, the goal was simple: build the fastest street motorcycle. And they did, but at the cost of rider safety. The H2 was powered by a 748 cubic centimeter two-stroke three-cylinder engine, making about 74 horsepower. Dry weight was just 423 pounds. It could exceed 120 miles per hour. Far too fast for a chassis with weak suspension and barely adequate brakes. What made the H2 truly dangerous was how the power hit. There was no smooth torque curve. Twist the throttle and the power slammed in like a switch. 1 second, you were cruising. The next, you were in a wheelie or sliding across the pavement. Many new owners crashed within days, experienced riders lost control mid-corner. Some never got back up. Motorcycle magazines and riders quickly gave it the nickname the Widowmaker. 1929. Megola Touring model. Some motorcycles are dangerous because they're too fast, others because of outdated engineering. But the Megola Touring model was different. It was dangerous from the very concept. Built in Germany in the late 1920s, the Megola had one of the strangest layouts in motorcycle history. A 5-cylinder rotary engine mounted inside the front wheel. Yes, really. The entire engine, with 5 radial pistons, spun inside the front wheel at up to 3,600 RPM, with no gearbox, no clutch, and no disc brakes. To start the bike, you had to push it and spin the engine with the wheel. It ran, but was incredibly hard to control. The forward-biased weight made cornering unstable. The ride shook violently at speed, and safe emergency braking was almost impossible. Every steering input was a gamble. The spinning engine generated gyroscopic forces that pulled the bike off course. The rider wasn't in control. They were along for the ride. Only a few hundred were made, but the Megola was sold to the public. 1951. Horex Regina 350. On the surface, the Horex Regina 350 looks like a gentle classic motorcycle from the 1950s. But don't be fooled. It's a mechanical trap in disguise. Built in post-World War II Germany, the Regina 350 quickly gained popularity for its clean design, 350cc 4-stroke engine, and nimble handling. Producing around 18 horsepower and weighing under 330 pounds, it seemed perfect for Europe's streets. But that's where the problems started. The tubular steel frame lacked rigidity, especially in the rear, leading to cracked frames, bent swing arms, or misaligned rear wheels under load or at higher speeds. Many riders reported accidents after the rear wheel suddenly shifted or the frame snapped mid-ride. What made it worse, these failures often showed no warning signs, and most riders didn't realize Regina had a critical structural flaw. To top it off, the braking system relied on traditional drum brakes, barely enough to handle an emergency stop. The Regina 350 didn't kill through speed. It killed through complacency and hidden technical weaknesses masked by classic charm. In the world of motorcycles, the line between passion and danger is always razor thin. The bikes on this list weren't just machines. They were symbols of an era when people chased speed no matter the risk. Some were built for racing, some born from bold innovation, and others were historic mistakes, but all left their mark, and a reminder that horsepower doesn't always mean control. Have you ever ridden or known a motorcycle that truly scared you? Ever lost control because of a flawed design? Tell us your story in the comments. We want to hear it from you. And if you enjoy strange, fast, and vintage content like this, don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, and share this video with a fellow gearhead.